No, I will. No,
since I've been here.
I will tell the governor how you treat me.
Okay, and you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, go ahead and check my background. I am part of that task force, and you're gonna let my husband treat me like this?
Because he has your ID.
On February the 8th of 2022, the police in Albuquerque, New Mexico were dispatched to the scene of a multi-car accident at the intersection of Lomas and Tramway. Immediately upon arrival, officers encountered a woman by the name of Michelle Curtis, who appeared agitated and unstable on her feet. She was asked to take a seat on the ground, at which point she began sobbing uncontrollably. As officers conducted their preliminary investigation, it started to become clear that Curtis, a political task force member appointed by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, was responsible for the crash, which had left much of the roadway blocked in its wake. It was later determined that she'd also been involved in a hit and run at a nearby McDonald's. Curtis repeatedly stated that she was on her way to pick up her kids from school. When asked if she'd been drinking, she admitted to consuming a little bottle of tequila, but refused to cooperate with law enforcement, even going so far as to use her perceived influence to threaten the officers' jobs. Despite Curtis's insistence that she knew the governor and could get the officers in trouble for arresting her, they ultimately did just that. The woman was charged with aggravated DWI, for which she was later given 1 year of supervised probation after agreeing to plead guilty. As part of the deal, Curtis was allowed to keep her position on the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives Task Force. Number 6. Rebecca L Doherty.
Kidding me?
Am I kidding about what?
I am absolutely out of my mind with...
You're intoxicated.
I am so intoxicated, but...
In February of 2019, Ohio Judge Rebecca L Doherty veered off the highway while driving in a snowstorm and consequently crashed into a ditch. Local police dispatched an officer to the scene who observed vomit inside Doherty's vehicle and also detected the smell of alcohol on her breath. The woman, who reportedly served on the Portage County Common Pleas Court, indicated that she'd been drinking that night. Her impairment was further displayed as she attempted to climb from the steep embankment into which she'd crashed. Doherty was unsteady and nearly fell over before finally emerging from the ditch. She noted that she was a sitting jurist several times, but was nevertheless taken to the local police station for processing. The judge partially completed a sobriety test and refused a breathalyzer, asking for the deputies to instead take her home. When they declined to let her go, Doherty repeatedly asked if she could call a friend who was a local sheriff's deputy to sort things out, but her requests were once again rejected. She was charged with a first-degree misdemeanor count of operating a vehicle while impaired, to which she later pleaded guilty. Doherty was given a jail sentence of 180 days, 177 of which was suspended, had her driver's license suspended for a year, and was ordered to pay a fine of just over $1,000. The court decreed that $700 of the fine would be suspended so long as Doherty refrained from adding any other drug or alcohol-related convictions to her record for 2 years, and completed a driver intervention program. 2 months after the incident, the Office of Disciplinary Counsel filed a complaint against Judge Doherty with the Board of Professional Conduct. The complaint alleged that her conduct violated the rules requiring a judge to act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the independence, integrity, and impartiality of the judiciary, and prohibiting a judge from abusing the prestige of judicial office. Doherty was thus issued a public reprimand for her actions. Number 5. Mary O'Connor. Back in 1995, a rookie cop from the Tampa Police Department in Florida was with her boyfriend when they were pulled over by a Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputy during the early morning hours. As the deputy tried administering a sobriety test to the boyfriend, the rookie officer, who back then was known as Mary Minter, became uncooperative. She allegedly tried interfering with the field test and was asked to sit in the squad car until the traffic stop was completed, at which point she began acting belligerently, kicking the vehicle's windows and even punching the deputy in the shoulder and chest. In the aftermath, Mary, who later married her boyfriend Keith and took his last name, O'Connor, was slapped with several criminal charges and initially kicked off the force. However, she was subsequently reinstated, and over the course of the next 3 decades, rose the ranks of the department until eventually being appointed Tampa's police chief. In 2022, the woman found herself at the center of yet another scandal in relation to a traffic stop conducted on the evening of November the 12th. She and Keith were traveling along a public road in Pinellas County in a golf cart when they were pulled over by Officer Larry Jacoby. In spite of the fact that Keith, who was driving, was unable to produce a valid license, Jacoby ultimately let the couple off without issuing any citations. As shown in viral body cam footage of the incident, Mary identified herself as the Tampa police chief before saying, "I'm hoping that you'll just let us go tonight." Jacoby indicated that he recognized the woman, then sent them off into the night with a handshake. Before driving away, Mary gave the young officer her card and told him to call her if he ever needed anything. Local media outlets fought to have the body cam footage released to the public, and after weeks of denying the video's very existence, the Tampa Police Department finally delivered it in early December. In the wake of the video's publication, Mary apologized for her actions, stating she'd used poor judgment by noting her high-ranking position to Officer Jacoby. After an internal investigation was subsequently launched, Mary resigned as chief per Tampa Mayor Jane Castor's request. Number 4. Karen Z. Turner. In 2018, controversy surrounded a commissioner for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey following the publication of traffic stop footage involving the public official's daughter and her friends. According to subsequent reports, Tenafly resident Karen Z. Turner, who served as chair of the Port Authority's Governance and Ethics Committee, received a phone call from her daughter on March the 31st. The young woman had been driving with friends when Tenafly police pulled her over for having expired plates. When officers discovered that Turner's daughter didn't have a valid insurance card either, they moved to impound the vehicle. Turner arrived at the scene a short time later and began arguing with law enforcement, repeatedly demanding to know the reason for the stop while sounding off about her close relationship with the city's mayor. The woman proceeded to threaten the police, indicating they wouldn't be able to charge her daughter because of her purported political influence, all while insisting that the officers address her as Commissioner. The contentious interaction culminated in Turner ordering one of the policemen to shut up, though her actual taunts included profanity as well. The woman, whose brazen display of entitlement and insubordination earned her the nickname Tenafly Karen, faced widespread backlash in the incident's wake. Her actions were reported on by national media outlets including CBS News, CNBC, and the New York Times. A week later, she resigned from the Port Authority, and the agency's chair issued an apology to the officers involved in the traffic stop. Turner was given an official censure as well as a $1,500 fine as a consequence for her belligerence. Number 3. Vanessa L Gibson. Vanessa L Gibson, a member of the New York City Council, was pulled over by Officer Michelle Hernandez of the NYPD in March of 2014. The liberal lawmaker, who'd been elected to represent the city's 16th district only 2 months prior, was accused of using her cell phone while driving, which she denied. During the course of the traffic stop, Gibson contacted the police department's deputy chief, Kevin Catalina, and pleaded her case. She maintained that Officer Hernandez's assertion that she was using her phone behind the wheel was categorically false. Although the councilwoman later said that she didn't explicitly ask Catalina to intervene on her behalf or interfere with the issuance of a traffic summons, that's exactly what ended up happening. The deputy chief got in contact with the precinct's desk officer, who in turn told Officer Hernandez not to write Gibson a ticket. Furthermore, the latter handed the phone to Hernandez while still on the line with Catalina, who then informed the officer of Gibson's position on city council, as though it exonerated her of her alleged offense. In 2016, Officer Hernandez sued the city for a reported $35 million, claiming that police officials had wrongly instructed her to rip up Gibson's citation. Although the suit was ultimately dismissed, the councilwoman did end up facing repercussions in connection with the incident. She reportedly reached a settlement with the Conflicts of Interest Board, stipulating that she needed to pay a $5,000 fine for pulling rank on Officer Hernandez. Number 2. Mary Beth Leach. During a ladies' night out on May the 12th of 2018, the wife of Hockey Hall of Famer Brian Leach, got into a brawl with employees at a gay bar in Manhattan. According to prosecutors, 49-year-old Mary Beth Leach subsequently tried to pull rank on responding law enforcement, indicating she had friends on the force and even knew the commissioner personally. She also allegedly boasted about her marriage to Leach, who was a local legend because of the 17 seasons he'd played for the hometown New York Rangers. During the course of his 18-year career, Mary Beth claimed that the fight, which left one bartender with a bloody gash on his head and multiple others injured, had been triggered after she, her sister, and their friend were asked to leave the establishment because they were singing too loud. The two sisters were subsequently taken to the NYPD's 19th precinct, where they were booked on harassment and assault charges. Although Mary Beth and her sister maintained that they'd been the actual victims of the bar fight, they eventually pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct and were consequently ordered to attend 5 sessions of solo counseling. Before our last listing, and in case you haven't seen our earlier release on when abusing power goes wrong, you can stay tuned afterwards if you'd like to watch that one still. Number 1. Tyrone Booth. In early 2023, reports surfaced online regarding a lawsuit that had been brought against the Flint Police Department in Michigan. Mary Busek, a former Flint detective, allegedly began experiencing a campaign of harassment at the hands of a fellow cop, as well as her superiors. Officer Tyrone Booth reportedly made unwanted advances towards Busek sometime in late 2017, when he was accused of ordering her to perform intimate acts and thrusting his groin in her face. She rejected him, at which point the prolonged abuse commenced. Over the course of the next 2 years, Busek was repeatedly threatened with demotion and termination by Booth, who used his ties to the department's upper echelon to keep the woman's allegations against him from leaking to the press. Busek eventually did get demoted, then resigned from the force and filed litigation against the department in 2019. Details of the abuse she'd suffered didn't come to light until much more recently, after she was awarded a $175,000 payout in an internal settlement. Booth, it subsequently emerged, had since been promoted to a 6-figure job as police spokesman, which as of the latest updates he still retained. Flint City Councilman Eric Mays was highly critical of the settlement, which he said would continue to cover up details that could have been humiliating for the department. Number 8. Amanda Myers.
Does it have to go that far? I'm a cop too. I know how that works.
In February of 2020, the police in Palmer, Ohio, were dispatched to a local bar after receiving reports of a minor traffic accident in the parking lot. Upon their arrival, law enforcement encountered Amanda Myers, a Kelly's Island police officer who claimed to have been working a side job at the bar that day. Myers, who'd reportedly been involved in the fender bender, proceeded to name-drop other public officials in an attempt to validate her story to the other officers and prevent them from questioning her level of intoxication. She stated that she knew the owner of the bar and indicated that his brother is the prosecutor. He knows the mayor. We're all cool. Myers admitted to having 2 or 3 drinks over the course of the day, but refused to submit to any sobriety tests. Despite her attempts to use her law enforcement position to avoid getting into trouble, the 29-year-old woman was ultimately taken into custody. She was charged with 3 misdemeanors: operating a vehicle under the influence, refusal with a prior conviction, and reasonable control. Subsequent reports indicated that Myers had only been convicted of the latter charge, but it wasn't made clear what the extent of her consequent penalties were. Number 7. Martin Hyde. On February the 14th of 2022, Florida police officer Julia Beskin pulled over a vehicle in Sarasota that she'd clocked traveling at nearly 30 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. Beskin approached the car and informed its driver, Republican congressional candidate Martin Hyde, of his alleged infraction. In an attempt to avoid a ticket, the man indicated that he knew the police chief, telling Beskin that she was making an unwise career decision by pulling him over. The officer then told Hyde that she didn't recognize him before calling the traffic stop in to her dispatcher. Beskin claimed that the man was being extremely uncooperative and told the dispatcher that she'd given him a total of 3 tickets: 1 for speeding, 1 for failing to produce a valid registration, and another for texting while driving. In the officer's body cam footage, the congressional candidate was later shown insulting Beskin's immigrant status, demanding to speak with her supervisor and repeatedly accusing her of lying about his traffic violations. In a further display of indignation, Hyde attempted to use his perceived influence to get out of receiving the tickets, asking Beskin if she knew she was dealing with a congressional candidate. In the incident's aftermath, Hyde uploaded an apologetic social media post in which he admitted, "I have faults, and one of them is to be overly aggressive on occasion when I'm challenged." On August the 23rd of 2022, Hyde lost in the primary of Florida's 16th congressional district election, only garnering roughly 14% of the vote. Number 6. Darlene Bradley. The mayor of a small city in central Florida was taken into police custody in December of 2017 after it emerged that she'd been using dead people's disabled parking permits to park at City Hall. The Polk County Sheriff's Office had initiated an investigation into the suspect, Davenport Mayor Darlene Bradley, after she'd been filmed parking in a handicapped parking space outside the government building. Investigators obtained a search warrant for Bradley's home, which led to the discovery of 2 disabled parking permits that had been issued to individuals who had already passed away. The mayor was consequently arrested on felony charges of using a deceased person's identification as well as possessing an altered or counterfeit decal. Those charges were ultimately dismissed after Bradley agreed to a plea deal in which she was sentenced to 6 months of probation and ordered to pay roughly $420 in fines. Number 5. Rodolfo Lopez Ibarra. In December of 2016, Mexican authorities apprehended Rodolfo El Nito Lopez Ibarra, the regional leader of the Beltran Leyva cartel in Nuevo Leon, Sinaloa, and Mexico City. At the time of the powerful criminal's detainment, the police also reportedly seized a level 6 armored SUV, a .38 caliber handgun, and $22,000 in cash. While he was being taken into custody, Lopez Ibarra allegedly offered law enforcement a $500,000 bribe in exchange for his release. The arresting officers refused, to which the cartel leader responded by threatening to use his criminal influence to have them murdered. The incident marked the second documented occasion in which Lopez Ibarra had attempted to bribe the police. Back in 2009, the man had been arrested along with 12 of his gunmen right before taking off from the airport in Acapulco on board a Cessna airplane. As he was being arrested with multiple firearms and a grenade in his possession, Lopez Ibarra told the officials he'd pay them $1 million if they let him go. When that proposition had been refused, the enraged drug lord vowed to exact revenge against the officers and soldiers, telling them, "You don't know who you are messing with. I am the new plaza boss." Number 4. Sandra Cunningham. On the morning of March the 4th of 2021, a New Jersey state senator was pulled over by the police after colliding with a pair of cars parked near her Jersey City residence. Prior to the incident, then 70-year-old Sandra Cunningham had represented the state's 31st legislative district since 2007. Throughout her interaction with law enforcement, the woman attempted to use her political influence and connections to avoid being punished for her actions. Immediately upon initiating the traffic stop, the officer at the scene noted that Cunningham was displaying clear signs of intoxication. She reportedly dropped a collection of cards on the ground when trying to produce her ID, then had trouble clearly stating her address and even confessed to feeling unsteady. While performing a field sobriety test, the lawmaker denied having struck the parked vehicles, instead claiming to have hit a snowbank while making a turn. When the officer told Cunningham that she was being taken into custody, the state senator asked for Jersey City's Public Safety Director, James Shea, by name. Her request wasn't honored, however, and she was arrested on a DWI charge shortly thereafter. In May of 2022, after 14 months of legal proceedings, Cunningham's charges were dismissed when prosecutors decided there wasn't enough evidence to prove their case. Number 3. Humberto Benitez Trevino. In the spring of 2013, it was reported that the daughter of a Mexican government official had thrown a tantrum after the owner of Maximo Bistro in Mexico City told her she couldn't be seated right away without a reservation. The young woman, identified as Andrea Benitez Gonzalez, proceeded to get even angrier when a vacant table was subsequently offered to customers who'd been waiting longer than her. For their perceived mistreatment of her, Benitez Gonzalez threatened the restaurant with governmental repercussions, indicating that her father, Humberto Benitez Trevino, was the Federal Attorney General for Consumer Protection. Only hours after the incident had occurred, federal inspectors arrived at the establishment with official suspended signs per Benitez Trevino's orders. The restaurant reportedly had 2 of its permits suspended, one regarding reservations and the other regarding liquor sales. The episode sparked outrage among the general public, which criticized Benitez Trevino for what was widely considered an abuse of power on his part. The man's daughter was also given the derisive nickname Lady Profeco. In the wake of the incident, the following month, Benitez Trevino was fired from his senior position within the Mexican government by President Enrique Peña Nieto, despite publicly apologizing for his retaliatory overreaction towards Maximo Bistro. Today's topic was requested by Hip Hop Struggle. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Monica Youngblood. New Mexico State Representative Monica Youngblood was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence of alcohol on May the 20th of 2018. In the late hours of the evening, the 41-year-old woman had been stopped at a sobriety checkpoint in Albuquerque. Officers immediately noted that Youngblood's eyes were bloodshot, and she smelled strongly of alcohol, while also indicating that she was slurring her speech. The politician was asked to perform 4 separate field sobriety tests, all of which she failed, and she subsequently refused to submit to a breathalyzer. In nearly 40 minutes of police body cam footage released in the traffic stop's aftermath, Youngblood was shown tearfully pleading with the officers not to arrest her. She also attempted to use her political positions as a legislator to appeal to the officers and escape criminal charges, stating, "I always stood up for you guys." It later emerged that in her capacity as a state representative, Youngblood had been a staunch supporter of harsher sentences for DUI offenders. She was taken into custody and, following a nearly 4-hour bench trial, convicted of aggravated drunken driving. Youngblood was consequently sentenced to 48 hours in jail, 1 year of probation, mandatory use of an ignition interlock for 1 year, attendance at DUI school, 24 hours of community service, and payment of court costs and fees. She ultimately lost her re-election bid to her Democratic challenger in November of 2018. Number 1. Kwame Kilpatrick. Kwame Kilpatrick was elected as the 72nd mayor of Detroit in 2002, after spending the previous 5 years as a member of the state's House of Representatives. The Michigan native's tenure in office, which lasted for 2 terms, was fraught with constant controversy and allegations of misconduct. During his first year, Kilpatrick was accused of organizing a wild party involving exotic dancers at the Manoogian Mansion, a city-owned property in which the mayor of Detroit resides. At one point that evening, Kilpatrick's wife arrived home unexpectedly and proceeded to physically assault one of the dancers. The mayor and other police officials were subsequently investigated for allegedly abusing their power to cover up the details of the party. In April of 2003, an exotic dancer named Tamara Green, who was said to have been in attendance at the Manoogian Mansion event, was murdered. Prior to her death, Green had been set to testify on record about the party, and it was thus theorized that she'd been killed in a deliberate hit by a member of the Detroit Police Department. To stop that from happening, Kilpatrick's tumultuous mayoral career ultimately culminated with his resignation in 2008, after he'd been accused of lying during the police whistleblower trial that resulted from the Manoogian Mansion ordeal. According to court records, Kilpatrick had falsely testified that he didn't have an affair with his chief of staff, and had also allegedly given misleading testimony about the dismissal of a deputy police chief. He was convicted of perjury as well as obstruction of justice and served 99 days in jail. 2 years later, Kilpatrick served additional time behind bars for a probation violation before eventually being indicted on new felony charges in connection to what was described as a pattern of extortion, bribery, and fraud by some of the city's most prominent officials. The former mayor was ultimately convicted of 24 counts, including mail fraud, wire fraud, and racketeering, and was consequently sentenced to 28 years in federal prison. In January of 2021, President Donald Trump commuted Kilpatrick's sentence, allowing him to obtain release 20 years early without having his conviction vacated. He was, however, still subject to almost $4.8 million in restitution payments, as well as the 3 years of probation handed down in his original sentence. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a supervisor at work who constantly undermines you by pulling rank, or have your annual wages withheld until you completed 40 hours of community service? Let us know in the comments section below.